Hello and welcome to this session, Trustees Management, Why Evaluation is Good for Your Voluntary and Community Organisation and How it is Part of Your Role. This session is designed for trustees and managers of small and medium groups. In particular, it tends to be talking about charities, but will be of interest to other small groups who are thinking of becoming charities or who are similar organisations. So this session is run by Impact in Action, a project that is run by BVSC. It's kindly funded by the City of London Corporation's charity City Bridge Trust and is part of a wider raft of support that you can have a look at by pausing this screen. So this is a little bit about me. I've worked in a range of small and medium-sized charities in Bromley, Bexley, Lewisham, Newham and various other places. So what the session is about, it's about asking the question, how do you explain and demonstrate the difference that your group would set up to make? We'll look at why impact assessment is important, why it's a requirement of your role, some of the things you should be asking your staff and volunteers to report on, and how realistic it is for your organisation. Normally this session is run as a 30-minute lunchtime slot, and if your trustees would like me to come and do the slot so that you can come back to me with questions, that's fine. It generally is a session that is much more kind of providing information to trustees, just because I've got to fit in quite a bit in 30 minutes. So as this diagram shows, we're at the bottom of the triangle where the training is being passed on, giving you the information. But if you want further information to apply it to your organisation and discuss and kind of more of a two-way process, then get in touch for some one-to-one support, or have a little look on our website for our resources, or maybe even sign up to the Way Up Quality Assurance Scheme, where you'll have kind of a range of different areas where you can make sure that you're working to legal and best practice requirements. So normally at this point I would ask the question of trustees, why measure impact? And I would see what people had to say. So it may be that you want to pause here and jot down some of your answers to the question of why measure impact? Why measure long-term and broad change? So these are some of the reasons why impact assessment is important. And starting on the left, funding. Funders are making decisions about who is best to fund, and so more and more they're asking not just how many leaflets you've handed out, how many workshops you've done, which is an output measurement, but they're asking what change resulted in that, an outcome measurement, and even more what is the bigger change that's part of? For example, reduced obesity in the Bexley Borough 2020 to 25 would be a bigger, broader change that other groups also work towards. And the reason that they're moving from this output to impact approach is because what really matters is how people change, not so much what you do, although that is important in resulting in change. So by trying to measure impact, the broad long-term change, we're trying to measure what actually matters, what actually sticks. And we're seeking to learn and improve as part of our learning cycles. So if we're looking at how things are changing and we spot that we could change things in a better way, or that what we're doing isn't actually bringing about as much change as that we hoped for, we can adapt our projects and learn from what we're finding out. And with COVID and lockdown and coming out of lockdown or into lockdown, all of these different things, it's more important than ever to make sure that our projects are aligned with needs and moving through that theory of change to the impact. So why is monitoring and evaluation impact assessment a requirement of your role? Well, it's not just me saying it. The Statement of Recommended Practice as outlined by the Charity Commission and relevant to charities says this regarding your report. The report must contain a summary of the main achievements of the charity. The report should identify the difference the charity's work has made to the circumstances of its beneficiaries and, if practicable, explain any wider benefits to society as a whole. In other words, it wants to know your impact. And further excerpt from SORP. A charity's accounts focus on its financial position and financial performance. In isolation, this information does not give the user a rounded overview of what has been achieved from the charity's activities and resources used by their delivery. The report and accounts taken together should provide a picture of what the charity has done, its outputs, or achieved, its outcomes, or what difference it has made, its impact. So again, even more clearly there, it's asking for outputs, outcomes, and impact. These are terms that I cover in session 1 of the complete package is 7 sessions, including this one, the half one. So in the first session, I go through the definitions of outputs, outcomes, and impact. So the Charity Commission has this excerpt from 2018. Charities must better communicate to the public through their annual reports and accounts, urges regulator. Obviously things change over time, and so depending on when you're listening to this recording, be a bit aware of that. But in general, there's that urging to have better communication, and it's doing us a favour if we're trying to give that rounded picture that it talked about in the last slide and show the difference that we're making. It's going to be attractive to the people who support us and who are part of what we do as beneficiaries. So as that excerpt said before, what are some of the things that you should be asking your staff and volunteers to report on? Well, according to the charity SORP, you should be asking them to report on outputs, outcomes, or impact, and I would suggest all 3 of those. So these are the definitions. I would go into that first session that I talked about, recording or the booklet, but this is the slide from that session, one of the slides from that session. There is further detail in the booklet especially. But an output is a product, service or facilities that result from an organisation's projects or activities. So for example, you've done 10 workshops, you've handed out 1 million leaflets, you've done this many casework sessions. An outcome is what becomes of the person as a result, and then an impact is the longer term change that happens, and can include direct users, indirect users. It can include what other groups are working towards. And as you may have spotted, there's a kind of progression here in terms of how much these things are within your control and how easy and quick they are to measure. So during this part of the session, I encourage trustees and management to move these boxes into the correct position and to determine which ones are outputs, outcomes, and impact. Just a reminder that outcomes include words of change. So you might want to pause here and see if you can match up these boxes. And here are the responses. So as you're asking your staff and volunteers to report to you each trustee meeting, you would probably want to have indicators. So 10 workshops per year would be an indicator, and then halfway through the year you might expect to have done half of your workshops, unless you skew things for a particular reason. So it kind of helps you to check whether you're on track. And how do you measure those outputs, outcomes, and impact? Well, there's lots of different ways to measure some of these things, and in session 3 of the 7 sessions I cover a lot on this. But you could have, so if you wanted to know how many people you helped, you would measure that with a register. If you wanted to know the change in them, you might do that during a survey. Other options for different kinds of things, conversations, a poll at the end of Zoom. So there's a poll option that you can bring up. I do a little bit of training on that that's available online, a 10-minute training session. Thumbs up and down on screen. So at the end of a session, how did you feel this session improved your, well, you don't want to say improved your confidence because that could encourage bias, but do you feel that your confidence has improved as a result of this session? Rather simplistic way to say it, but you get the idea of the thumbs up, thumbs down. The online whiteboard, again, there's some 10-minute training on that on the website. Observations, photos, case studies, and I've written at the bottom, so long it falls off the bottom. So some trustees and management will be thinking to themselves, well, how realistic is this? And some of the common concerns are time, money, and situation. I would say that that during COVID, funders are reassessing how they do stuff. You may be reassessing what projects you're running, and so working towards a theory of change, which is something we go through in session 2, thrashing out some of how these changes will result in a bigger change of impact, is something that takes a bit of planning. And now is a good time to do that before just sort of rushing into doing the work. You may want to be thinking through how you're going to have different people working. In terms of money, the support that I'm offering, thanks to the City Bridge Trust, is for free, and that's only up until July 2022. So, you know, that time will run away quickly. A few training sessions every other month and the time is gone. So get in touch quickly. And situation. Well, sometimes organisations may say, oh, you don't understand my particular situation. I can't survey children or whatever. But actually there are ways to get around stuff, and we, you know, charity sector needs to be overcomers because we're maybe daft enough to think that we can help to change the world, and so we need to have that attitude when it comes to this sort of stuff too. You know, although we may not be able to survey toddlers, it may be that we can survey their parents or carers, or to have observations. So there are ways around a lot of the difficulties that are thrown up by this, and I cover that in one of my other sessions as well. So in this diagram, I encourage groups not to panic, not to try aim for perfection straight off. In the top section of the diagram, the person is unhappy, and they remain unhappy for the majority of the time because they've aimed for perfection from the beginning, but the vehicle hasn't actually functioned until right at the very end. Similarly, with impact, trying to work towards an impact approach, it's not going to happen overnight. And so, you know, have something that will do the trick, work for now, from the beginning, get you from A to B from the beginning, and you'll find that generally you can improve and develop that in a kind of more organic kind of way. So some quick wins to get you started. I would, if I were a trustee, be reviewing what reports your staff and volunteers give you. Are they logging outputs, outcomes and impact? I would think about getting some quotes in the trustee report section of your annual accounts. And on that front, I do have a one-page wonder that's on the resources pages of BVSC website. I would be thinking about gathering some case studies, which often are one of the first ports of call for organisations who are starting out on an impact journey. And I would book some sessions with me. If you're looking for more general information, BVSC and our Way Up Quality Assurance Scheme is a helpful place to start, to make sure that you're covering all the different things that you should be. The Charity Commission and the HMRC websites are useful for telling you what you need and must be doing. There are a number of groups here, so FSI, Small Charity Coalition, Directory of Social Change, NCVO, NAVCA. If you need to know, if you can't seem to find those, give me a shout and I can tell you more about that. And how to go about it, there is this useful link here. So normally with the interaction time, this session would be a little bit longer, but we've been very brief here. Thank you for your time, and it'd be great if you could fill out this this just very short survey so that I can pass the information on to our funders so that I can be checking how I can improve, and we can use it in marketing and to other potential funders too. So thank you very much for your time, and if I can just ask you to fill that out, that would be great. Thank you.